Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Spoiler the Warning podcast. This is review number 719 with a review of Tar. I'm Christopher Schnese.
And I'm Stephen Miller.
And if you're joining us for the first time, the Spoiler the Warning podcast is a weekly film review program. Each week in the show, we're going to dive in, debate, discuss, and argue over the latest films coming to a theater near you. This week, we're here to talk about Tar, which is a story about a fictional composer/conductor. Stephen, you and I grew up in and around music. It's been a big part of our lives. Have you had any experience with actually doing conducting or anything? Or have you ever really kind of thought about the amount of work that goes into conducting at all?
I have never had any personal experience conducting. I thought about it only because a friend of mine is a conductor in New York, and I've wanted to understand a bit of what he does. And despite the fact that we've had multiple conversations about it, I still do not fully grasp. I feel like I'm still at the level of the straw man questions that kind of open up the interview that's happening in this movie, where it's like, what about people who think you're just a metronome? Like, I understand composing, and I understand the idea of being the kind of, I don't know, the CEO or the product manager of the orchestra of like, I'm going to make sure all of this comes together and sounds right in the end. Yeah. But the literal meaning of conductor, when I think of what they are doing in the moment as they conduct, I still don't understand that. And I'm not sure how much of it is wrapped up in the preparation that is training everyone. Like, is the conductor the director of the orchestra? Because I think that makes a lot more sense to me.
Yeah, I think, I did a lot of band in high school and stuff like that. And there was one time where the teacher was out for some reason, and they made me like take over for one class session. And I was definitely just emulating what I saw, like doing the sections that we usually go through every single day and kind of just going for it. But I was just play acting in that role. Like, I had no concept for what I was actually doing. And I think that it is, this film, it's not really holding your hand along the job of what a conductor does. But it was interesting to kind of look at it and be like, yeah, I don't really think about a person's interpretation of something, right? Like, in my head, if I go see a symphony or something like that, I'm going because I want to hear that symphony. I'm not thinking, like, to me, in my head, if I see that symphony 3 times conducted by 3 different people, in my head, I'm seeing the same thing. You know what I mean? Like, I'm watching the same show 3 times in a row. But, like, obviously the characters in this film would want to smack me around and be like, are you kidding me? Those are completely different shows, completely different. And, like, the people who are really into it would be like, oh, my God, this person is conducting. I have to see their interpretation of Mahler's whatever.
Exactly. I mean, I'll do you one better in terms of how much of an idiot I am when it comes to classical music. I rarely think about the fact that when I say I have, quote, like, heard this Beethoven, suite or whatever, I've only heard one very particular interpretation. It isn't like there was like a microphone back when Beethoven was around and I'm listening to the original. And I very rarely even credit in my mind how much unique sound comes from who is performing, let alone who is interpreting all of it. I just kind of take it for granted of like, oh, that is the canonical, Pachelbel's canon, or that is the canonical XYZ. And it is very dumb of me. Probably most of them are from movie soundtracks. Now that I think about it.
I mean, it does go back to like, we have reviewed on the podcast musicals that are not the original cast of the original Broadway version of whatever it is that was turned into a film. And like, we've talked about comparing those scores, and for some reason that makes 100%. It's a different cast, it's different singers, blah, 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 blah. But it doesn't even strike us in our mind of like, oh, but different people playing the same instruments interpreted through another person's notes on what the original composer's thoughts were about the piece of music is definitely something that I, take for granted all the time. And was interesting to watch this film just fly over my head in a way in many, many scenes and go like, I don't know what any of that means, but I'm now thinking about this differently.
Yeah, well, I also wonder, again, anyone who truly understands classical music is probably screaming right now, hearing me openly wonder things I could Google in 5 seconds. But when an orchestra performs a classical piece of music, I know the arrangement list many instruments. I don't know, is it the same number of everyone each time performing, or when an orchestra is interpreting a piece, is there some flexibility going in to decide, well, we have, this many violins, so this is how we are going to do that work? Or like I assume they don't add or remove notes. Like I assume it's kind of like scripture where you're not supposed to like add or remove an actual sound, but I feel like there must still be some kind of arranging that happens. I assume composers did not write every possible combination of instruments that could be seated for the duration of, mankind when people are performing.
I'm a little bit outside of my depth, but I have listened to podcasts with video game composers, which, may or may not be relevant to this conversation here, but they've definitely discussed moments in time when you are getting to perform a piece that is arranged one way live in an environment with a preset group, and you provide different versions of the music to match what the orchestra that is going to be performing it. So I know that can happen when the composer is still alive, and can provide the music in that many arrangements. But I assume that somebody does a translation in similar things. But we're definitely getting into the territory of people are going to be mad at us for talking out of our ass.
For sure.
Not that anybody listening to this right now would be somebody that would listen to classical music at all, but
well, because just in the beginning, this movie opens with a kind of interview that feels a little TED Talky or whatever about, Lydia Tár and what it means to be a conductor. And she says, like, there's actually a lot of interpretation involved. For instance, when Bernstein performed Mahler's XYZ, he chose to add a longer break from 8 beats to 10 beats. And I'm like, that is like the most extreme thing you can think of.
But Stephen,
you gotta
that
give
changes
me more.
Everything about
you gotta
this
give me
piece.
more than that.
We're just not on Lydia's level.
I know we're not on her wavelength.
Yeah,
but I stan her. I'm a member of Tar Nation.
All right. Well, should we get into this, Stephen?
Let's do it.
All right. Let's go ahead and take a listen to the trailer for Tar, and then come back and give everybody a review.
If you're here, then you already know who she is. Lydia Tár is many things. As a conductor, Tár began her career with the Cleveland Orchestra, Chicago Symphony Orchestra, the Boston Symphony Orchestra, until she at last arrived here at our own New York Philharmonic. In 2013, Berlin elected Tár as its principal conductor, and she's remained there ever since. Lydia Tár has also written music for the stage and screen. She is one of only 15 EGOTs, meaning those who have won all 4 major entertainment awards. Thank you for joining us, Maestro.
Thank you.
How's the writing going?
Not so well. I keep hearing something.
Schopenhauer measured a man's intelligence against his sensitivity to noise.
Do you ever find yourself overwhelmed by emotion?
Yes. Yes, that does happen.
We have a problem.
I received another weird email.
There's no reason to get caught up in any intrigue.
I'm worried. She's starting to disappear into herself.
You want to dance the mask? You must service the composer. You gotta supplement yourself. Your ego and, yes, your identity. You must, in fact, stand in front of the public and God and obliterate yourself.
All right, so that was the trailer for Tar. Set in the international world of Western classical music, the film centers around Lydia Tár, widely considered one of the greatest living composer-conductors and first ever female music director of a major German orchestra. Stephen Miller, what did you think of Tar?
I thought Tar was a pretty stunning movie. It is the kind of movie I don't see very often, which it is clearly a heady film that has a lot to say. It moves in a way that I found very gripping, like not quite like whiplash levels of adrenaline, but like starting to verge on that territory. And yet when I try to describe the synopsis, nothing sounds like it should have been particularly stressful or moving or anything. There is something about this that just was a very like encompassing adult movie experience of like, I don't know. I don't know how to explain why I loved the movie so much, except that I just found it like captivating. Basically, Cate Blanchett, I think, is just amazing as inhabiting this character of Lydia Tár. I think how you experience her probably depends on how much you knew about the movie going in. I knew that, I mean, I almost don't want to spoil it now because I don't know how much I want listeners to know about the movie going in. I had heard roughly what the character arc would be, or I'd heard the character of Lydia Tár described in a way that tells you what her trajectory is in the movie. And I am really curious if someone did not know that going in, how it would feel. Because there are a lot of scenes in this movie. A perfect example is a moment where she's speaking at Juilliard early in the movie, and she's giving a kind of guest lecture. And over the course of one scene, she basically shifts from, wow, this person is making so much sense, she's telling it like it is, to she's still making sense. I'm a little uncomfortable, but God, I can't argue with her. She's like right about everything she's saying, to wow, what an asshole. And she does it in a way where like you can't find the line. Like you can't tell how the one became the other. She just is this kind of like, I don't know, very forceful presence who believes everything she says.
Yeah.
And the whole movie, it just kind of, it bounces between being kind of experiential scenes of making music and observing her relationships and kind of identifying with what isn't being said, how she is doing with all these different people. And then this creeping dread that eventually becomes more and more obvious as the movie goes on. And it's the kind of thing I don't really want to spoil in a non-spoiler section because I truly don't know how it is being marketed or how the general public, what they know about it going in. But I thought it was just a totally captivating movie about a person with a very strong ego and a strong personality and the things that can happen to them and the kind of like the self-inflicted wounds that they can make. And yeah, I really, really liked it.
Yeah, I mean, this, I had that piece of information that you're trying not to reveal last night because that was the sell you gave me to see this film. You said, hey, this film's coming out. It's this and this. And I was like, all right, sounds good. And so I carried that with me into this film as well. But yeah, I was really wrapped up in who Lydia Tár, the character, was, and like watching Cate Blanchett play this character. I think that that line you talk about is super interesting in this context because she's an asshole. She might be maybe even more than an asshole, depending on what you're talking about. But I think that this film is selling us on the person is not as important as the creation that a person can do, right? It's sort of like that talk you're talking about, where she was given that guest lecture, like she is purposely being antagonistic against somebody in that scene. And her argument is like, you can't take away from the pure creative energy of what somebody can create just because of who that person is. So it's kind of like this film is kind of getting out in front of anything that could possibly go wrong with this character or make you not like her or something. Like she is upfront saying like, hey, all that matters is making the best possible music that you can. And this highest form of art and interpreting is the only thing I care about. And you know, she makes some, you know, bad decisions over the course of the film, but they seem to always be in service of the best outcome for the project that is kind of going. Like,
she sets it up in a way where that's true, at least.
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously, we're led to believe that she is making very selfish decisions, but there are many times when there are other people in the room who make the same decision, right? It's not like it's all up to her. She is guiding it, but I feel like there are times when it's not purely her manipulating. It's her manipulating to bring something up, which, given other people's willingness to participate or not, allows for that to come forward as the best potential option, right? Like, I'm speaking specifically about maybe a cellist, right?
Yeah, sure.
So like, obviously there are other things that don't fit into that bucket, but it is interesting to watch like this trajectory of this character who is kind of teaching us as we watch about what is involved in the creative energy involved in you know, conducting and leading an orchestra, and then we are watching it potentially unravel a little bit based on things, you know, chickens coming home to roost or whatever. But yeah, I think that all of that stuff sort of starts to pile on towards the end. But I think for me, the only part of this film that didn't work is the psychological thriller aspect of it, because I think the tension is there enough on its own. And trying to, like, before we got started, I asked you if you could hear the trailer audio, and I just happened to select a spot in the middle of the trailer, and I just hit play, and you were like, what the hell movie was that from? And it was like, it was shocking to you that the sounds that you were hearing in that moment when I hit play were this film. And that's kind of how I felt at some of those moments where, like, you know, I get that the character might be unraveling a little bit, but does it need to feel like it's playing in the tropes of like ghosts and possession and like weird stuff? You know what I mean? Like, I kind of, for me, I didn't need that to understand the stakes that were involved. But like, beyond that, I really, really enjoyed this film. I think the very, very end, I don't know if it's worth doing a spoiler conversation about, but
we should do a mini one because I have a few questions.
Yeah. The very last shot of this film, I think, is making a statement in filmic language that I think might be counter to the thesis this character in real life might feel. And I had a hard time not dealing with it, but it kind of put a sour taste in my mouth, because I was like, everything about this character has taught me one thing, and how this character feels in this specific moment. The common language of film tells me that this ending means something completely different than what I think it actually means, and I kind of don't know how to totally balance that.
We should talk about it, because I also feel like, and I might be dumb, you know, I feel like the ending of the film almost plays as like a joke, and the rest of the film doesn't need to end with a joke, and it doesn't even make sense that it would be fodder for a joke. I don't know. I think maybe we have similar feelings about it, but we can talk about it in spoilers.
Okay, cool. Yeah, more non-spoiler comments.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think of. I've really tied our hands behind our back by not being able to talk about what this movie is about. It's a shame. I mean, there's a lot of kind of micro interactions that start to give you a sense of the character of Lydia, and a lot of them follow that line between, oh, she's doing the right thing to get the right outcome, and something isn't quite right about the way she's doing it.
Yeah.
One is her daughter is being picked on by a bully at school, and she cares a lot about her daughter. Like that is made very clear. It seems like her wife and daughter are maybe the only two people that she has a remotely open, you know, understanding and relationship with. And so she talks to the little girl that is bullying her daughter. And you kind of, every movie I've ever watched primes me to be like, hell yeah, this is going to be great. She's going to, she's going to do the good parent thing. She's going to scare away this little kid or tell them like, hey, don't you ever pick on my daughter again. And she takes it too fucking far. She basically like threatens to harm this kid if she touches her daughter again. Yeah. And I feel like it is the Juilliard scene again. Like it is a lot of Lydia's character is like, you could imagine her self-justification for why what she did and what she said makes sense. And people are just, overreacting if they don't understand it. But when you watch it, you just feel like you are a person that is, power hungry, that is like a little drunk or out of touch on what you are allowed to do by virtue of who you are. And yeah. I like the way the movie kind of sprinkles that into all of her life, even tiny little things like that.
Yeah. And I think too that like, this is a person that is like top of their game. Like this is like a literal rock star in some ways, right? Yeah. And there is a seductive nature to that on both sides of the coin, right? Like people want to be close to her because she can do something for them. She might want people to be close to her because they could do something for her, right? Like there is, for parts of this film, it's not quite sure whether this is like mild manipulation or heavy manipulation, right? Where it's kind of like, hey, this person had, like, for instance, she after her little TED talk that she gives, she's talking in the lobby with a person, and there's clear like flirtation in that situation, right? But it's a person sort of like she likes the affection this person is throwing at her, and that person just wants to be close to her. There's nothing actually transactional about that sort of conversation in the lobby, and they both part their ways, and that seems to be done, right? So it's kind of like this film is throwing out that like there are these moments where people just want to be near that star power and have access to it, and kind of, there is an attraction there maybe in both directions, but like we don't necessarily know if there's anything beyond that in that moment. And obviously, like, that might change over the course of the film. It might change between different people, but it's interesting how this film tries to sort of play in that gray area, and then also sort of kind I about what is the purpose of these interactions and what is the end result of it, for the orchestra and the performance and stuff like that. And I liked it dipping into that, where it's more gray. And I think the most fun that this film has with those type of interpersonal interactions with people is once the Olga character comes into the picture, because I think a lot of the humor in this film comes from that character,
and that character maybe not lining up with our expectations or the way that the film is setting up how this is going to go down.
Yeah, and I think too, like I mean, maybe we can bring her up again in our little mini spoiler segment at the end, but I think that the most fun this film has is centered around her and how she plays into this, and I'm still not sure. I feel like there's some premeditation, and I definitely made some assumptions about where this film was going based on what little pieces of backstory we get of that character, and ultimately I don't think the film went that direction, but it definitely teed some stuff up in a way that I was like, oh, is this could be super interesting.
Yeah, I think it's compounded too because the movie likes to deal in gray areas. I mean, I wouldn't say by the end of the movie we are morally gray on how we feel, but the path to getting there involves a lot of gray. And it's compounded by the fact that the movie is edited, or I won't say edited, it's not like they filmed all of it and then cut it out, but the story is told in a way that leaves a lot of, ellipses. It like ... It skips over things, and it purposely keeps the kind of the central story, the conflict at the heart of it, implied a lot of the time. And there are moments like you talk about the flirtation at the beginning of the movie with with a woman after she gives her talk. There are implications because there is time that we don't see, and there are characters who tried to give her a phone call, but the movie never shows you the thing it is implying. And so we don't know, because later we do get more insight. It's funny, I'm trying to talk around it, even though anyone now has to know what I'm talking about. But anyway, like, even as the movie shows us more of Lydia's internal calculations and the way she kind of navigates the gray or tips it slightly to advantage the outcomes that she wants, it never really shows us her getting what she wants in the way that she wants it. And it implies that she has, and probably is frequently, but we never see it. And I think that just makes it very interesting. And it's true with the relationships in her life, not related to this too. Like I assume it's her wife, maybe it's just her partner, I don't know, Petra, played by Nina Haas. There is a whole history there that is, I would say, well established, without ever saying it, in terms of, here's who we are, here's how we met, here is what that might imply, here's how our understanding is now of our relationship. And that it manages to do it without ever really talking about it, just by like filming that. It reminds me of After Sun a little bit, which is a movie we're going to talk about soon, which is it fills in a lot of details without telling you, just by letting you observe the dynamic that they have right now. In how did they get that way. And I think it's really effective there, and really helpful for a movie where we are being asked to, I'll say, sympathize with a person who is not perfect. Anyway. I don't know to what degree we're meant to empathize or see through Lydia's eyes, but we certainly, it is poking you. Like it is trying to make you decide where the line is. And if you can zoom out and see a line, why can't you find the line moment to moment? And I think that is just a really interesting dynamic.
Yeah, I mean, I think I would definitely say we're supposed to empathize with at least the journey the character goes on, given that ending and the way that ending is presented to us as a reveal, from a slow pan away from what we're looking at. But we'll get there in a moment. I will say this one thing that we've talked about. This is very, very smart people talking about subject matter where they don't dumb it down for the audience. And like, it's impressive to see people who are having a conversation that could be complete gibberish, right? It might as well be people on the engine, in the engine room of the Enterprise talking about, space gibberish. Yeah. Right. Like it's that level of, if you don't know what they're talking about, it might as well be completely made up, but it's probably not made up, right? Like this seems like it's probably like all the words they're saying. And I kept thinking as I was watching the film, like, it must be, I think I brought this up in regards to another film that we've seen recently, but I can't remember what it is. But like, in my head, when I see people perform dialogue like this, I see it as being a very, very difficult feat of acting, because if you, like, let's say you're doing a tragic death scene, right? You have all the information you need. The person has a person in their arms who is dying. That I know the motivation of the character. I know where the emotion is coming from. Like, I 100% understand it. When two people are talking about a piece of music and whether something is like fortissimo or whatever, it is not a, like, unless the characters are like, really, really understand that particular piece of music and they think that's the greatest thing on the planet, and they've seen 5 different performances from 5 different conductors and they can tell the difference between all of those, and they know exactly what the person did differently and the choices that they made, and they could comb through that person's the book, I want to say script, but that's not correct.
Music book.
Yeah, the music book.
It's like, performance notes, the something notes.
Yeah, I forget what it's called. It's the music script.
I think it might be performance notes, at least that they call it.
Yeah. Well, like, unless you understand all that, the thing you are doing is complete artifice, which I guess is just acting, so that's fine. But like, in my head, I'm like, it must be really, really difficult to show the level of emotion for something that, like, you literally don't understand, or it doesn't make any sense to you when you hear it. So I kept thinking about that as I was watching this film, just going like, I wonder if they have any concept of what they're talking about right now, or if it's literally just... And like, that goes all the way down to the script level. Like, obviously you can't write the script without, like, unless somebody would, like, wrote the script and then went to, like, a composer and was like, can you write this conversation over lunch and just talk about your favorite composer's music in that moment? You know, like, it's hard to understand how somebody can do that this convincingly and have it mean something to them in the moment. And it's just, when I watch, it's not that it takes me out, I just can't stop thinking about that aspect of the performances in the film.
Yeah, it's funny. To me, it's a testament to the performances that I didn't think about it very much, even though I like, it also does make me admire it a lot, because it isn't just the emotion they have to show. It's like, if you are Cate Blanchett in this movie, you have to give off a vibe that you know so much. You are casually tossing off opinions from this, like, deep well of other opinions you could have pulled from at any moment, and you need to convince us that you know so much that you can converse this way and not even really try. Yeah. And I think it is really hard to convincingly make a conversation that to me sounds like it could be in a foreign language be, like, convincing and feel natural, right? I'm sure there has to be some kind of lengthy study beforehand about the art and about composing in general, and if nothing else, just like talking to composers and getting a feel for the way that they talk about music, because I do find it really impressive.
Yeah, in my head,
I don't know what any of it means, so maybe I thought about asking if my conductor friend wanted to watch the movie and be a guest on the pod, just because I would be curious what a conductor would feel about this.
Yeah. In my head, it would be like, the equivalent would be like if you were shooting a food commercial and it was supposed to be the best food you've ever tasted, but you had, like, those jelly beans that taste like vomit, and that's what you had to eat, but you had to perform it as though it's, like, the most decadent thing you've ever put in your mouth. So.
or just being told to, like, act like you are engaged in a really interesting conversation and you're laughing, but you're actually talking to, like, a blank wall, right?
Yeah.
You just have to conjure all that, even though the content is not actually giving you anything.
Yeah. Cool. Any last non-spoilery things you'd like to talk about with this film?
No, just that Todd Field, the director, is a bit of a... I don't know about an enigma, but he made 2 really well-renowned movies and then disappeared for, like, 15 years. And I am very interested to go back and watch his earlier films now and kind of understand where he came from. But this movie definitely is good enough to make me want to go back and watch them.
Maybe he was studying composition and conducting.
Yep.
He's like, I got the script. I think it's good. I don't know what any of it means, but... All right. In a moment, we're going to have a little spoiler conversation, but for now, we're going to get to verdicts for this film. Stephen Miller, if you were going to give this a must-see, recommend with a caveat, wait for rental, pass with a caveat, or a must-avoid, what would you give it?
I'm giving it a must-see. I feel like it's just a very complete, rich film that is well-acted, well-paced. I had no problem with the psychological thriller aspects of the movie. I don't think they stuck with me as much because I kind of forgot they even existed. I think just as an engrossing movie that it is dealing with a real, somewhat modern cultural phenomenon, but it's doing it in a way that embraces a lot of gray, and it just kind of, I don't know, I think it captures you in a really interesting way, and I felt like the movie just flew by, and I was very glad to watch it.
Yeah, man, this film is definitely something that pulls you in from that opening. I mean, maybe I've watched enough TED Talks about interesting subjects to, like, be instantly like, okay, I know where we are. This is cool. But yeah, I really enjoyed it. It's a must see for me as well. Like I said, I did have a little bit of problems with the feel of the psychological, like the introduction of the psychological thriller kind of aspects. But I think my problem might have been less with that and more the speed at which the ramp up at the end happens, where it goes from like, I wonder how this is going to go to, oh, it went.
Yeah.
And not gonna lie, I got real scared this movie was gonna end with a UFO taking off. But that's something that
definitely some reminiscences.
So it's a joke for, I think, just you and me. But
it's a joke that will never be recorded digitally. You have to watch it in a movie theater.
Yeah. But yeah, that's the non-spoiler part of our review of Tar. So we're going to say goodbye to anybody who hasn't seen this film, but y'all should go out and see it and then come back and listen to the spoiler segment. But for now, Stephen Miller, where can people find you throughout the week if they want to do that?
People can find me at twitter.com/sdavidmiller or sdavidmiller.com.
People can find me at ChristopherInRealLife.com or Twitter.com/ChristopherIRL. You can find the podcast over at thespoilerwarning.com, where you can get a bunch of the back episodes of the show. If you want to subscribe to the show, you can do so in Overcast, Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, or wherever podcasts are found. If you want to get a hold of us directly, you can send an email to fans@thespoilerwarning.com, or you can use the contact form on our site. Music for this episode will come from a track selected from artlist.io, so hopefully you're enjoying that. And that music is going to fade up, and then eventually that music is going to fade out. And when it does, we're going to be in that little gap between the song that she talked about and in the opening.
I'm a little sad you didn't say the music was going to decrescendo and then crescendo, or try to pull in some kind of music words.
Yep,
we're smart. You would never know by listening to us talk that we both played in bands growing up.
Steven, that was so as many years as it was that I played in band. It has been 3 times that long.
Yeah, I have literally been co-hosting this podcast with you longer than my entire time playing an instrument that required reading sheet music, even though I felt like that was a big part of my life.
That is 100% accurate. And that is the much nicer way to talk about it. The time we've been podcasting together, not our ages.
And if I'm so bad at podcasting, imagine how bad I was at music.
Never had one lesson. All right, so yeah, we'll be back in a moment. All right, we are back. This is spoiler territory. It's the after part of our review of our conversation about Tar. Not a review of our conversation of Tar, but a review of the film Tar, for which we had a conversation. So yeah, we'll get to the ending in just a moment. Let's talk about the Olga character for a little bit. First, I made a comment about some of the decisions that Cate Blanchett's character of Lydia makes in this film are in that gray area of, like, clearly she is attracted to this cellist who comes out of nowhere. It's not quite clear if it's pure attraction versus attraction to her abilities and talent as well. Like, it's sort of like like there is some sort of raw talent that she has that is both exciting and new to Lydia, and it's kind of like a mixture of physical attraction, talent attraction, and all this kind of stuff. She obviously makes a, call it bold move to allow this cellist who is not actually a member of this orchestra compete for the option to be the soloist in this. At the moment, we don't even know that it's going to be a cellist forward piece that they're going to do, but they're going to let her solo in this thing, and she does this introduction where it's like, hey, anybody who's here right now can do this, and I know that we have a first cellist already, but we're going to make her audition as well, and it's kind of like, whoa, that's super fucked up. That cellist decides not to participate in the thing, so she is one of the jury who is going to select these people. They do a blind audition, and all the language of the film and of the people who are judging this blind audition clearly pick Olga, right? Like, it's kind of weird with the audition because it seems like they do two separate pieces of music, and one piece of the music is more emotional and just like if they played identically, but they chose the two different songs, I think the audience would pick the more emotional song because it sounds more beautiful. So it's like, we don't know necessarily which one sounds better, but there's one song where like the camera's panning in on people like almost crying as they listen to it and stuff like that. It's like, okay, well, clearly, though it was fucked up to give the option to Olga to do this, seems like it was worth it. Like,
yeah, well, that's kind of the maneuvering involved, because there's a few steps here. First, I think we skipped one. I believe that earlier in the film, when Olga is just auditioning, like doing blind auditions, after Lydia sees her, she changes her scorecard, or there's something that like indicates that happened. So even from the beginning, she is like, letting her, if I can give the most generous read, letting her like fondness for this person that she sees something of herself in, right? That would be maybe like her defense of it, seep in a little bit. Then, because she got to know her better, she learned where she came from, what she got known for performing. And my understanding, but I am too much of an idiot when it comes to classical music to know for sure, is she not only decided to make the solo be a cello solo to give her a chance, she picked a song that she knew she would be able to do very well at. Like, she tailored this decision to her based on that YouTube video. So it's like you have someone auditioning for a song that they have maybe never played before, and someone else who's like, this is the thing I've been honing for this whole time. So that is, tip. And then the final tip, I don't even know enough about orchestras to know if when she says, let's audition this role, let's hold auditions, she is saying you, the actual first cellist, can compete, or no, you won't because you have so much else to do already. Like, I didn't know if it was a act of protest that makes the main cellist not audition, or if it is implied when you say you're going to audition something that it is like not going to the typical person.
So I think the way I interpret it is because she turns to her and she says, this might be a little bit of like whatever, but like, we're going to ask you to, it's kind of like if you like went in for like a movie audition and you were playing Stephen Miller, right? You're like, I mean, it should just be me, but as a formality, you want me to audition to play myself, right? Like that's sort of the situation that I got. And I just interpreted it as her saying like, I'm just going to take this opportunity to bow out and say like, I'm like, it looks better for me to be one of the judges on who is going to be featured as opposed to potentially not get picked.
Right.
And then now it's like, well, are they going to challenge me for my spot after the performance? Like, what's going on? So I kind of took it as like she kind of tried to save face and just become a judge on it. And like, it seemed like the rest of her, I almost called it department. It's section. The rest of her section. This is how long it's been since I've taken a band class. The rest of her section, kind of in solidarity, also didn't, except for the one fucker who was like, this is my shot. But little did he know the little child prodigy who was going to be going up against him.
Yeah. But I think the interesting thing of gray areas, and I don't think we've explicitly said it yet, but this movie is, about, there has to be a better phrase than a Me Too phenomenon, but I feel like the whole of it, of using her power to get implied sexual favors, certainly leering and flirting and showing favoritism to people who flirt back. This movie is kind of all about that, and this Olga situation is a great example of the gray areas of it, because again, if someone asks Lydia under oath or whatever to testify why she did these things, she could probably come up with a compelling narrative where she is not doing anything wrong. It's like, hey, everyone needs a leg up. God knows I did. I didn't come from greatness. I had to, claw my way to get it. And I saw this woman named Olga who just resonated with me a lot, and she doesn't have all the accolades of other people here, but I wanted her to be able to prove herself. Like, there's a narrative where everything that she did in this scene in a different movie is like the coach who believed in you, giving you the help you need to succeed.
Yeah.
But this comes under this context of her past behavior, the character that she drove to suicide and had basically blacklisted from every possible orchestra as a result. The young assistant that she travels with, that clearly there is some kind of implied, you never really know with Lydia in general, if the implication is flirtatiousness and liking to be around beautiful young women, or if the implication is actual sexual favors, right? Like, the movie kind of purposely never shows you that at all, except for a few implications of like her getting dressed in a hotel room, and you kind of assume that this is like after meeting a person that she met earlier in the movie, but you never really know for sure, right? It kind of leaves it open to interpretation.
Yeah, we're not seeing it progress in real time during the film. It's only allusions to what's happened in the past. But I think one of the reasons why this young woman entering the arena of sorts, for this, is that she's fucking impervious to all of it. And it's not just that she's immune to Lydia's charms. It's that she's almost antagonistic against it from a level of background of the art. It would be like the equivalent if somebody went out of their way to get you a spot on a sports team, and then you were like, oh, I never played a day in my life. I just am good at, I can throw a ball real fast, so I'm going to be the pitcher. You know what I mean?
It's funny. I feel like she's played not only as immune to her charms, but oblivious to her desires, right? She's just
So I don't think it's oblivious. I think she specifically came there because she knew she could use it to her advantage. And I think she came there potentially having heard rumors about who she was. She came there because she probably wouldn't have otherwise been able to get it. She has the talent to get there, but there's so many steps to get there that she was like, I know her. I'm going to come. I'm going to, click my shoes as I walk to the audition and back. I'm going to purposely go in the bathroom, even though I don't have to use the bathroom, just to let her see me first. I am going to smile at her when it's appropriate. I'm going to do all this thing. I'm going to get a free trip to New York. I'm going to do all these things. And then I'm just going to fucking shut it down, and it doesn't matter. Yeah. And I'm even going to tell her to her face that I don't care about any of the stuff she cares about. But I'm also going to do it with a smile and be a little flirtatious, even though I'm not interested in women, just to eke it out of her, because for her, there's no threat of anything, right? She is just playing into something. Like, she is operating in the gray area herself, and she's using it to her advantage because she knows she's not going to get caught in this situation. She is going to be able to get out of it just by playing oblivious, and just by potentially saying something that makes Cate Blanchett's character go, huh, that's a weird answer to this question. She was able to just weave in and out of that so perfectly and use it to her advantage that I just kept it's just slow clapping in the back of the theater going oh my God, this is amazing.
That's so interesting. See, I mean, I got the same kind of the comedy of her thwarting Lydia every time, but I didn't ascribe a grand plan to it. So much as just someone who's like, hey, I'm here to do one thing, and that's play music, and sure, you're the person in charge, so I'm gonna eat with you and talk with you, and I'm gonna take lessons because I want lessons, and I'm gonna travel because I love to travel, but I don't care about any of this peripheral stuff that is implied by us meeting together.
Yeah.
I got, maybe oblivious is too strong a word, but I got more I just don't. I don't have it, because she's not even. if she were trying to play her, she would be more charming and more everything, and she just shuts down so often, unless it's just like a cat and mouse game where she's like, look at how far I can go to not appease you and still have you fall in love with me.
I think that's what it is. Because, like, I mean, even like when they get there and they're like, hey, do you want to go out and get dinner? And she's like, oh, jet lagged, sorry. And then she immediately gets stressed out and goes to meet some random dude. Or maybe it was a friend that
totally,
she...
yeah.
Like,
in my head, though, that's more like just a young person with their boss or whatever. That isn't like a grand plan so much as like that. Lydia gets her ego wounded because she realizes she's just she's like the loser boss who the person doesn't want to hang out with. But I didn't see that so much as like a master plan or anything.
Yeah, there was a lot of things where I started to get kind of suspicious. First of all, this film opens with a weird fucking shot with no context, which I couldn't tell if it was like an Alamo pre-roll, don't use your phone in the middle of a movie sort of thing, or if it was the actual movie. Because it's like the shot...
No, because it does that motif a couple times, right? Where it's like, I assume it's Francesca who's like Snapchatting or Instagram storying to someone or something like that.
It's Olga. So, because she's using it when they go to New York and she's there for the book tour, she's in the back flirting with the dude, and she is on her phone. There's a couple times when she looks up and like it's some. This is how not in touch with what the youth uses on their phone. It's some texting app where you also can show the back camera while you're texting. And like she's showing like this is happening right now, this reading's happening. I even feel like she was like insulting her, like, oh, she's not doing very good or something. Like I don't remember exactly what it was, but I was like, oh, that must have been her at the beginning. And then like we already established her script for the orchestra script. It goes missing, and I was like, is she fucking working her the whole? Because like we get this little background about Olga, that she is like, the one thing she does care about is like she's a member of like this like feminist group that like is like trying to cause change and stuff like that. And I was like, is this whole thing like a takedown of this?
Yeah.
Like I was like, oh my God, did she steal the fucking script thing? Like I was like waiting for all these like domino pieces to like come crashing down. And like this is like this secret plan of Olga's to like take her down. And I was like, oh, okay, none of that happened, but that's cool.
Yeah. Interesting. I guess at the very beginning of the movie, Alamo was still like taking people's orders and stuff, so I didn't like fully catch the opening bit. But I assumed that it was like her assistant Francesca is showing like secret contempt for her, even though she has such a smiley face and demeanor and everything to her the moment they're talking together. So I read that as being like totally chronological, with the story.
Yeah, I at the time I was like, I don't even know what that is. But then later on, when they're doing it at the book reading, I was like, oh shit, was that her at the beginning of the movie too? And that was the flight from New York to thing, right when all the shit was going down. But whatever. Should we get to the big ending?
Oh yeah, sure. The ending that takes place in I think it is never named, but some Southeast Asian city that Lydia is at. Well, so there's two parts of it. There's first the penultimate moment, I would say, where she goes to get a massage, and I don't know if she knows the implication of that or not, but she goes to get a massage, and then it quickly becomes clear that what she's actually doing is picking among a lineup of women who are seated very much like people in an orchestra. Yeah. And she has this like really kind of averse.
She loses the taste.
Yeah, she loses the taste. She feels sick from it. And that, even on its own, I like it in the context of the whole movie, but I don't totally know what it is trying to say. Like, if she went there not knowing that she was entering an exploitative situation at all, or if like she went there with that intention and then something about it reminding her of the orchestra being what triggered it. I couldn't quite tell what the movie was doing.
I think it's the layout. Oops. I think it's the layout of the people. For the first time, it's indefensible that it's even a gray area, right? Like she is literally a person of power just making a choice, and somebody has to do what she wants. And I think it's like when made literal. The entire metaphorical situation of her entire career suddenly becomes just right there and on the nose, and she just goes, oh fuck.
Yeah. Because then, and then the final scene is her back with an orchestra again, giving another, kind of stirring introduction to what she's about to perform. And then the camera, panning over and seeing that I believe she is performing the score for a video game with a bunch of cosplayers sitting in the audience.
Yeah, it's basically a live orchestra performance of the music to Monster Hunter. And, and everyone in the audience is dressed up as a character from the game. And it's not just a slow pan. It is her walking out on stage. And like we know that she is basically conducting a young group of musicians, but she gets ready. She's about to start perform, and there's just this beat before she can start where screens descend from the screen, and then the projector comes on, and you start singing the video game. And then as the music starts, there's voiceover and everything, and there's just a slow pan out to people in ridiculous costumes. And that language to me of this film says, oh my God, look how far she has fallen. This is what she's been reduced to. Now, the penultimate scene is her going back to her childhood home, watching a tape of Leonard Bernstein giving a talk about music has this magic. It's basically like a Mr. Rogers type of thing where it's like, hey kids, music is great for everybody, and there's nothing better than just having music. It doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be this crazy, really, really special music. It can be just music that you like, and that motion that you feel when you listen, like, it's basically this thesis for this character is, yes, there is prestige in what she was doing before, but the thing that she actually cares about is interpreting music on a page and bringing out performances in people and directing them to create something that is wholly unique and special on its own. So it's kind of like that you have that little conversation that's happening that kind of lets her know that, like, no matter what she does, as long as she's putting her full self into it, it's just as valuable as, doing so-and-so's fifth whatever.
Like, so I would say, I mean, there are two things, because so basically she should at that moment be 100% committed to this and finding some kind of solace in it, because she's doing a thing 100%, and who cares about the ostensible prestige? Yeah. And yet the movie obviously is playing it as maybe not obviously. To me, it is playing it as a joke of, like, look at what she's been reduced to.
Yeah.
And maybe it's doing that with a wink, and she still truly does have the pride, and maybe it wants her to be humiliated, and it's doing it that way. But I would also say, like, early in the movie, when she is at Juilliard and she's talking to the student about why he picked the music that he picked, she talks about, like, how much there is there. Like, is there really depth to this thing that you're interpreting? Because if there isn't, why waste your time?
Yeah.
And, like, sure, it's fine if you like it, if you think it's doing something cool, but is it saying something profound? Is it like, your life is too short to waste time on anyone who isn't, like, one of the greats? And so by that aspect of her personality, it kind of feels like doing this is selling out this thing that she claimed to believe in before, unless she thinks the original composer of the Monster Hunter soundtrack or score is one of the greats. I don't know. But like, there's something there where for her character, this might indeed be a comeuppance, or it might be that she is doing her Bernstein and finding her joy with music. But either way, I just don't like that the movie ends on a smirk about her. Like, I don't really tonally like that is the way it chose to conclude.
Yeah, and I think too, it's a weird dig to it, like video game music. And I don't mean to be like the video game apologist on this podcast, but, like, she's already going from being, the Berlin whatever orchestra to a bunch of kids, essentially. Is kind of what it looks like. So it's already the step down, but then to be like, no, it's cool, guys. Just kidding. Look at, she's doing video game music and people are in costumes. How dumb is that? Like, it felt like such a weird knock that I was kind of like, Like, where's your bar, filmmaker? Like, is it like if this was the score for prestige television, would, you know, if they were doing Game of Thrones or something, like, would it still be like, oh, can you believe how far she's fallen? Or would it be something different?
Because
like,
she already has an EGOT, so she's clearly done like television and movies and stuff before too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know, which is why I wonder if it weren't, like you say, the language of the film makes it a joke. Because otherwise I want it to not be a joke, you know? Because it could be, it's kind of like the final evolution of the canceled person is, you know, it's Louis C.K. performing in like Budapest or whatever. It's like, I'm just going to like find another thing and lay low for a while and do it, and I will still find adoring people who like what I do, and then in a couple of years I'm going to come back and people are going to pretend nothing ever happened.
Yeah.
You know, and that is the kind of cynical version of the joke that it could be, but the way the camera reveals it definitely feels like it is playing at the fact that she's doing this at all is one big joke against her prestige. You know?
Like it could be a fresh start for her, but yeah, the language kind of like made me go like, whoa, that's a weird thing. But it's also like, you know, we've already talked about, you know, she's you know, she's performed with the best musicians in the world, people who can sight read better than we could ever dream of playing, right? So yes, she's interpreting things and she's got all of her notes and she's making them do stuff, but those people could literally do that to a metronome, right? Like take the best every musician in the world, put them in a room, put on a metronome, and they will make what is the most beautiful music to most of us, right? If she can make these young folk do video game music that is as transcendent as what, like, you know, the greatest musicians in the world can do, that is actually that's like doing everything on hard mode, right? So it's it's kind of like it could take a person who has all that prestige to go and teach high school. Like if their life fell apart and they had to be like a high school music teacher, you could argue that's a big step down for them. If like from, you know, their pay and their everything that they were doing in life is quote reduced to this, right? But as a challenge, if they did that and they're like, I am going to take these high schoolers to a professional competition and make them play as good as everybody else did, you'd be like, fucking A, yeah, you did good.
And, you know, being a high school music teacher, one of those days you get a student who might be a child of deaf adults, and maybe you can get her to go to Juilliard where she can get shat on by Lydia Tár, and then the cycle continues.
Very nice, very nice.
I feel like she actually goes to Berklee School of Music, not Juilliard. I don't remember.
She does go to Berklee School of Music, but same difference. But yeah. Anything else, David?
Nope. Good movie.
All right. Good movie. Great movie. All right. That's it for this, for our spoiler segment for Tar. We're going to head off and record y'all a review of Decision to Leave. So be back in a bit. Bye.
Bye.